Welcome everyone, this is Rambling Collector, here with the first episode of what I would like to call Reading Reflections. Now, this series will be interesting. Instead of me covering, let's say, a new book or series, instead I'm going to go back and explore older series with this one, much more classic ones, and further down the line, when I finish a complete series, I will also review it on this series as well. So, I figured for the first episode of Reading Reflections, I would start off with a literary classic that has sparked a love of fantasy or even urban fantasy for a lot of us readers when we were young. That being the classic series Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. So, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. My introduction to the Harry Potter series was actually pretty straightforward. My first ever encounter with it was actually not the first book, but in fact the first film, Sorcerer's Stone. After that, it was through movie 2, Chamber of Secrets, but unfortunately I was a child and I fell asleep halfway through the film. But then after that, I was curious to actually see more of the Harry Potter world, so I actually picked up the second book of the series, because I thought back then that the first book was the same as the first film, so I just went ahead and started with book 2, the one that I left off at. But then right after that, after finishing book 2, I was captivated. I wanted to learn more about Harry, his story, his friends, the world of Hogwarts, and everything else around it. It was an inspiration to me. It became a driving force to finish this entire series. And oddly enough, I had actually finished the entire Harry Potter book series twice over, that I can remember. But yeah, twice sounds about good. But what's not to love about it? We all know the story of how Harry finds out he's a wizard, goes to Hogwarts, faces down his greatest foe, that being Lord Voldemort, the darkest wizard ever, until Grindelwald showed up in the Fantastic Beasts series. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So, like I said, it has been a classic for me that I've read twice over. I've loved every second of it, but now, looking back at it through the eyes of an adult, I can safely say that this series has a very dark tone to it. Because when you look at it as a child, you're thinking, oh, those mean Dursleys, why are they so mean to Harry? But then as an adult, you look at this and you're like, this is straight up child abuse. First of all, we have Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Hagrid choosing to leave baby Harry, a 1-year-old boy, who has just survived a murder attempt by a dark wizard terrorist, having his parents be murdered and leaving him with a cut on his forehead, and leaving him out in the cold in the early mornings on British soil on the doorstep of his distant relatives. And how do these relatives react when they first get Harry? Oh, let's see here. They lock him up in a closet underneath the stairs for practically 10, 11 years of his life. And then right after that, it just gets progressively worse and worse. Because then he actually starts discovering magic, things like that. And I'll go over which one I believe was probably the worst instance of this, but looking back at it, as you keep going, like, as it progresses, you see how they go from, like, physically beating him to just locking him up in his room and pretending he does not exist. But still, the fact that Harry had to endure this for years and years and nobody called Child Protective Services because the Dursleys were that good at covering their tracks speaks a lot about something there. But other than that, there's another darker story here too. Harry essentially being raised as a sacrificial lamb just to try to defeat Voldemort in one way or another, all because he has a piece of Voldemort's soul attached to his forehead. Which, I get it. Horcruxes are rarely ever studied because they are some of the darkest magic around, but Dumbledore, couldn't you have found a better opportunity than having Harry go to Lord Voldemort saying, "Hey, Voldemort, here I am, go ahead and kill me"? I'm sorry, I just have a few problems with that. I really do. As well as, let's talk about this. I know for a fact he's a fan favorite, but I do not have the highest opinion of Severus Snape. Simply because, yes, he did a lot of good simply because out of his love for Lily. However, that does not excuse his actions with the fact that he was a horrible teacher and a generally bitter and horrible person in general. Like, yes, it's nice that he got a little bit of redemption, but it still does not excuse his actions throughout the other 6 of the books. The fact is, he was blatantly biased towards his own house, and he specifically went out of his way to target the golden trio of Harry especially just because of his trauma of being bullied by the boy's father, something that Harry had no idea or recollection of, just because his father had barely even been mentioned. They always recognized how he was a good man, and he was a star Quidditch player, but that's all they ever tell Harry about. But then when Harry actually sees one of Snape's memories, it actually... what's the word I'm looking for? It shakes the foundation of his belief in his parents. To that point, seeing Snape's recollection of one of his worst memories of being bullied during 5th year, it shakes the foundation of Harry's belief that his parents loved each other, simply because he saw his father when he was younger and a bit of an idiot. And then seeing his mother actually calling out James Potter on his bull, yeah, that's definitely something. I am not a fan of Snape. Yes, he had his redempting moments, but at the end of the day, he's still a horrible person. But regardless, I like how as the series progresses, the books get progressively larger. The largest, of course, being Book 5, but we all know this. And I really like how the scope of the story becomes progressively darker as it goes on. It goes from simply exploring the world of Hogwarts all the way to just dealing with magical government, being on trial, dealing with some of the darkest creatures imaginable, like Dementors. And if you were to ask me, the scariest creatures in the Harry Potter universe for me, Dementors are definitely top tier just because of the fact that they are soul-sucking fiends. But secondly would probably be Acromantulas. And I blame a lot of things for giving me arachnophobia down in this day, Acromantulas being one of them. How do you react to a giant colony of ginormous man-eating spiders living in a forest right next to a school for children? This world is kind of messed up, not gonna lie. But overall, I like the stories of friendship, blooming love, overcoming the darkness, realizing that through love and friendship you can overcome even the greatest of evils. I like that. It's a common theme that we all need to learn about one way or another. And despite his hardships, Harry tries to be a good person, and he succeeds a lot of the time, even if he is a bit naive at times, but that's just because of the fact of the environment he's been raised in. It's hard for him to recognize love. But I do like how progressively we see his struggles get greater and greater until eventually he finally overcomes his foe and finds peace. Now, I hear a lot of you asking, what is your thoughts on the Cursed Child? Well, I'll tell you. There is no such thing as the Cursed Child. That book was absolutely awful, and it's absolutely a travesty to Harry's character and everyone else who has followed these 7 books. Hence do I cast Obliviate! Now, back to more favorable topics. I want to discuss with you all my favorite books out of the entire 7-book series of Harry Potter. Those being Book 2, Chamber of Secrets, Book 5, Order of the Phoenix, and of course, Book 7, The Deathly Hallows. I'm going to go over each of these and explain why I enjoyed each of them individually, but more importantly, why they stuck out to me as my personal favorites throughout the entire series. So, to start off with, Book 2, Chamber of Secrets. This one here has a very special place in my heart, simply because of the fact that it was the very first Harry Potter book I ever read, and henceforth introduced me to the wizarding world as a whole. And like I mentioned before, I had watched the second movie when I was younger, but I'd fallen asleep halfway through. So now I wanted to fill in the blanks by at least reading the book. And if you were to ask me, the mystery here, the introduction of the 4 founders, the Chamber of Secrets itself, the mystery of what lies within the chamber, and more importantly, who opened it, that was an absolutely fantastic mystery to get me started. I was hooked throughout every time. Whenever I had a chance through my school years, I would always try to get it done as quickly as possible, and then immediately dive back into Chamber of Secrets. I was that hooked. But more than that, a few things. I feel like Chamber of Secrets has the Dursleys at their worst. And let me explain why. Though a lot of you probably already know this. Let's see here. They at first don't know that Harry is not allowed to use magic outside of school, until it is revealed during a dinner party through Owlpost. And Harry's of course in trouble for a charm that he did not cast, but then of course the Dursleys find out about this, and they punish him severely. I mean, first of all, on his birthday, the fact is they got Hedwig, his pet owl, his owl familiar, locked up in a cage the entire summer, and of course they've got his trunk stashed in the cupboard under the stairs, his former bedroom, by the way. And the only reason they even moved Harry in the first place was because they thought all the wizards were tracking them, which they kind of were. But anyways, after this is revealed, after all of this, the fact is they have Harry sitting in his bedroom pretending he does not exist on his birthday, whilst they are downstairs trying to suck up to this rich couple, just to give Vernon both a new client for his company as well as a possible promotion. They are all rehearsing their roles in order to make this the best night possible and be able to secure Vernon's promotion in the company. And what do they give Harry? Instead of having him actually participate, they literally tell him, "I'll be in my room making no noise and pretending I don't exist." My Jesus Christ. That's fucked up. Not even gonna lie, that is messed up to a severe degree. And then after they find out he is not supposed to use magic outside of school, they go to some extreme degree, stating he will never be going back to that school. And what do? They put bars on his window, put multiple locks on his bedroom door, only letting him out to use the bathroom or to do household chores. And they feed him through a cat flap. Somebody please call Child Protective Services. This ain't right. This is messed up. I don't like it. Get it out of here, please. And not to mention, I love the Weasleys, though, coming in to rescue Harry on a flying car. That was absolutely genius, and I loved every second of it. Especially with how they just yanked the bars right off the door. Like, oh sure, let's just go ahead and get this hook and rope and yank these prison bars off the boy's window. And my question is this, though. Why did they not keep those to present to, I don't know, the Wizarding Child Protective Services at that point? Either way. Let's see. The introduction of the Burrow. Meeting the rest of the Weasley clan. Like, we'd have met the twins, Ron and Percy, beforehand, but this time we are introduced more to Mrs. Weasley, Arthur Weasley, and of course Ginny Weasley. Pretty much the majority of the Weasley family is presented here. They are all fantastic in their own ways, and yet despite their situations of being pureblood wizards, they are looked down upon. And this is where we actually get the first glimpse of how messed up Wizarding Society is, how very classist it is. Because, let's do a comparison here. You have the Weasley family, pureblood family, generally looked down upon by other purebloods, simply because they are more inclined towards the light, and they actually have a bit of a fondness for muggles. And, unfortunately, while they are rich in spirit and heart, they are very poor. Now let's compare this to the Malfoy family. They are very rich in financial wealth, very high standing in the wizarding community, but at the same time, you can definitely tell that they are aristocratic, biased, and just frankly not the nicest of people whatsoever. And this generally shows that difference in class that really just does not do well for the wizarding world in general. But then right after this, we see the whole things of Nocturne Alley, we see more of Diagon Alley, and of course we're introduced to one of the worst teachers of Defense Against the Dark Arts, Gilderoy Lockhart. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I kind of pictured him with this very pompous voice, just like, "It's too late, boys. I shall take this skin, tell them I was too late to save the girl, and tell her that you two tragically lost your minds at the sight of her mangled body." just this very pompous, high-pitched kind of voice. I kind of pictured it with that. Does anyone else feel that way? I mean, honestly, just that alone is funny to me. And of course, the whole Valentine's Day fiasco with the flying men singing songs and giving away Valentines, that was hilarious. I will at least give J.K. Rowling credit for that. That was hilarious. And of course, let's see here. Oh yeah, the Chamber of Secrets itself. People getting petrified. When I first heard of petrification, I literally brought up to Greek mythology's Medusa, who turned people to stone with a single look. And when I figured of petrification, I figured it was exactly that. Students, and of course, nearly Headless Nick, being turned into like stone statues in a way, frozen in the positions they were in when they were frozen, when they were caught. And needless to say, that was definitely a very haunting image, but none so haunting as the acromantulas themselves. And I will tell you right now, the acromantula nest, these talking ginormous spiders, freak me out even to this day. Especially with the fact that Aragog was going to sacrifice Harry and Ron, two friends of Hagrid. He was just going to say, well, I don't let my kids eat Hagrid, but I will gladly give them fresh meat. So goodbye. Hi, Hagrid's friends. Enjoy being supper. Yeah, no. Hagrid, you need to look more at your friends and get your priorities straight, please. Speaking of Hagrid, I like how we actually get some backstory on him, but also on Tom Riddle, aka Voldemort, revealing that Hagrid was expelled because he was accused of murdering a young girl due to the Chamber of Secrets being opened by Tom Riddle. So Tom Riddle essentially used Hagrid as a scapegoat for that point, just to kind of cover his tracks, due to the fact that Hogwarts was risking being closed, and Tom Riddle had the fear of going back to the orphanage for good. And then, of course, the Chamber of Secrets itself, the reveal that it is in fact a giant snake, and of course the beginning of the introduction of the Founders, whose legacy permeates throughout this entire series, not just because of Hogwarts, but from the artifacts they left behind. In Slytherin's case, Salazar Slytherin, I should say, his locket, the Chamber of Secrets itself, and with Godric Gryffindor, his famous sword, Rowena Ravenclaw, the diadem, and Helga Hufflepuff and her cup. All of this works well, in my opinion, how it permeates throughout here. And then, of course, the chamber itself. I will not lie to you guys. I did not picture it as this vast, ornate chamber, very well done. I pictured it as kind of this crumbling stone brick dungeon where you've got rats and skulls littered everywhere. You've got this ginormous snakeskin sitting around, barely functioning torches whatsoever, and just carvings of snakes all over the place. And I pictured it as kind of crumbling in a way, not gonna lie. But then, of course, when we get to the chamber itself, I pictured the statue of Salazar Slytherin towering up to the ceiling, with Harry, as it is described, having to practically bend over backwards just to be able to see the head of this thing. And of course, when the basilisk comes out, how it seemingly thuds to the ground. I pictured this thing falling straight from the top of the statue all the way to the ground, which that alone would be terrifying. And the basilisk itself, also very gruesome and terrifying in its own way. And I just pictured this thing just like running around, banging its head against the walls, and of course Tom Riddle being revealed as well, being responsible for the whole Chamber of Secrets fiasco again, albeit through a diary medium, through the body of young Ginny Weasley. All of this made for some great twists and turns, which really hammered my obsession with Harry Potter at that point, and probably magic and mysteries in general. That would explain why I like the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher so much. Anyways, moving on. Order of the Phoenix. I know for a fact this book is very divisive among Harry Potter fans for a few reasons, one of which being the fact of just how long the book itself is, at a whopping 800 pages. one of the largest books in the entire series, and even J.K. Rowling has stated that she hates how large this thing was. But for me, I loved Order of the Phoenix simply because at this point, this was where the major turning point for Harry Potter came. This is where the darkness of the wizarding world really started to creep in because, for one, Voldemort has just returned as of the end of Book 4, Goblet of Fire, and we are wondering what his plans are for world domination, which is what I thought it was, world domination at first. But now it's just conquering of magical Britain. Anyways, so we see Harry being isolated, alone. We see him having to struggle a lot with this, feeling like he is surrounded on all sides by enemies, with barely a way out, always being scrutinized, always being watched. Not only is he being haunted by the death of Cedric Diggory, but also dreams of the Department of Mysteries via Voldemort, who desperately seeks the prophecy about himself and Harry Potter that he did not realize he had received an incomplete reading of until now. Thus, he started using proxies to try to break into the Ministry of Magic and the Department of Mysteries just to try to figure out what that prophecy said. And throughout all of this, Harry not only has to deal with just Voldemort just trying to kill him, he has to deal with the magical government, the Ministry of Magic, publicly calling him a liar, knocked in the head, whatever, a fame hog, everything else. He is getting slandered by the Wizarding World's newspaper and the government themselves by them denying that Voldemort has even returned, when Harry, if I recall correctly, returned with a dead body, a person who was seemingly supposed to be dead being revealed as a servant of this Dark Lord, only to have Fudge bumble and get the main perpetrator of the Goblet of Fire fiasco, the reason why Harry was even in the Triwizard Tournament in the beginning, to get their soul sucked out, thus killing a key witness for Voldemort's return. And, of course, all of this leaves Harry very frustrated, very angry, especially when he feels like he's getting no contact from his friends, only for it to be revealed that, of course, Dumbledore intervened in Harry's life again and told his best friends not to write him, even though that's one of the dumbest decisions I've ever heard Dumbledore make, simply for the fact that at this point, Harry is struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder and survivor's guilt. On top of all of that, everything else he has to deal with, he has to deal with 2 mental disorders. That ain't fun, people. But then, of course, we get introduced to the Order of the Phoenix, Number 12 Grimmauld Place. We see Sirius Black in his prime here, only for him to get killed. Rest in peace, Sirius. One of my favorite characters getting killed in this book. Also for the introduction of another favorite character of mine, Luna Lovegood. I'm sorry, but Luna Lovegood is one of my personal favorite characters, simply because she's a free spirit. She doesn't care what people think, despite being bullied and belittled for her wild imagination. She stands out, and I love her for it. Not to mention her commentary in Book 6 during the Quidditch match was absolutely hilarious, and I loved every second of it. And then, of course, we see Harry founding the DA, the introduction of a character who is hated probably more than Voldemort, Dolores Umbridge. I don't think I need to go into detail about her, but I despised her, simply because while Voldemort will just kill you, Umbridge will torture you and belittle you, and she could get away with it because she's in the pocket of the governor, the Minister of Magic. And meanwhile, another one of my personal favorites, McGonagall, she really stands up here. At one point when Harry's being asked about what his future career would be, that being an Auror or a magical cop, Umbridge is just slandering Harry left, right, and center, stating how he's failing in all of her classes, only for McGonagall to fire back, stating that Harry's gotten top marks in every defense against the dark arts class taught by a competent teacher. McGonagall, this is why you are awesome, and why you have redeemed yourself. You are amazing. And, of course, more than that, we see Harry going off to the Ministry, and if I'm going to be honest with you, the battle in the Department of Mysteries, while some may not like it with the whole build-up, the whole chase scene, I personally felt it was very creepy and a good bit of survival horror in a way. Just because these are kids who are dealing with experienced terrorists and wizards who are not afraid to kill. Well, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Luna are barely trained and are currently just running around trying to survive at this point. That's the big kicker there. They're just trying to survive, running around this whole department of crazy things going on, from floating brains to a room full of time machines, like all of that. And more than anything, I feel like Order of the Phoenix definitely upped the creepiness factor with, for one, Harry getting attacked by Dementors in the first act of the book. Number 12 Grimmauld Place itself, with Creature, the wailing portrait of Sirius's mother, and of course just the doxies, the whole thing of how this thing is filled with dark and corroding artifacts, and definitely does not deal with the nicest of families. So you can see what Sirius has to juggle here, despite being a very good person. He has to deal with a very twisted legacy. And then, of course, the Department of Mysteries itself. Once again, the Time Room, the Room of Prophecy, the Veil Room, and, of course, the room filled with the brains, which was definitely creepy, not gonna lie. The brains are terrifying, first of all. And, of course, when this young Death Eater gets his head reverted to that of a squalling infant, my god, that's some nightmare fuel right there when I think about it. But then, of course, the monumental duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort was absolutely beautiful when I picture this in my head. The duel in the film was well done, I will not lie to you guys, but when I picture it in the book, I see Dumbledore like throwing around transfiguration spells. You have just these two juggernauts, Dumbledore and Voldemort. One a champion of dark magic, one a champion of the light, going at each other head to head, casting things like serpents, silver shields, transfiguration, bringing statues to life, casting water, fire, all of that, and just throwing it at each other willy-nilly as they are actively trying to defeat, or in Voldemort's case, kill their opponent. It was beautiful and I loved it. Hence why Order of the Phoenix, despite its divisive among the fans, is still one of my personal favorites. And of course, finally, Deathly Hallows. Must I say more? Definitely one of the darkest ones, with Harry on the run, once again with Ron and Hermione hunting down the pieces of Voldemort's soul, as well as his many anchors to the mortal world. All of this leading up to a very satisfying conclusion and a very monumental final fight. I will not lie to you guys. The drama of Harry, Ron, and Hermione sneaking into the Ministry, all of that just to get Slytherin's locket. And then, of course, the whole history of the Peverell family, the reveal of the tales of Beedle the Bard. All of it was very well done. The reveal of the Deathly Hallows, the backstory of Dumbledore and Grindelwald, the reveal of Dumbledore's little sister Ariana Dumbledore and how she possibly could have been killed by either Dumbledore himself, his brother Aberforth, or Grindelwald. Nobody knows. Nobody can really go back and take a look at what exactly happened during that time. It was just flashes and bangs and everything else. And realizing that Dumbledore's little sister was essentially the equivalent of a magical time bomb? Jesus. But also, Deathly Hallows is one of the saddest and definitely one of the darkest moments there, is when they go to visit Godric's Hollow. And I know in the film it just shows Harry and Hermione going there by themselves, but in the books it's so much sadder, because they go there in disguise as an old married couple. But then we see them finally reaching Harry's parents' grave, and it is definitely one of the saddest moments there. Because at that point, Harry is just leaning over their tombstone, sobbing his eyes out, realizing that he's finally visited his parents. And he's just envisioning their skeletons lying there in the ground, and the skeletons of Lily and James Potter are laying there, unaware, knowing that their son is right above them, wishing that he himself was right there sleeping under the snow with them. That alone says a lot right there, that Harry is 17 years old, juggling all of this, and at that point wishing he could just be with his parents, and just let all this be over. It's a very sad and honestly tear-jerking moment if you really think about it. The fact that Harry, once again, is only 17 with the fate of the world on his shoulders, people fighting a war, over him. It's a lot to take in when you're just 17 years old. So I can understand Harry's thought process here. But then, of course, we move on to the Battle of Hogwarts. And my God, when it comes to final battles, J.K. Rowling pulled out all the stops when it came to this final battle. When I was reading through it, with not just Harry confronting Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle in the Room of Requirement just to find the diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw, only for Crabbe to start casting killing curses and then setting the whole place on fire. Like, dude, that's a bit too far, don't you think? And then, of course, the reveal of Severus Snape, his backstory. That was really good. But going back to the battle, I loved how they adapted the final battle in the screen. But in the books, they have McGonagall with her hair flying around, leading a stampede of student desks that she is transfigured to come to life, while an army of suits of armor and stone statues is fighting out on the grounds. Meanwhile, you have Grop the Giant fighting against other, much more massive members of his race. Like, just the thought of that is absolutely terrifying, to watch two giants go to town on each other. That is a scary thought. I'm not even going to lie to you guys there. That was crazy. Just the sheer detail that went into this was phenomenal. And of course, when Harry goes off to sacrifice himself, choosing to come back, and then of course the final fight where people are just firing spells left and right in an absolute frenzy, as they all just go right into the Great Hall and fight each other practically to the death. Like, you have Ginny, Hermione, and Luna fighting off against Bellatrix Lestrange. So it's like 2 3-on-1 battles, with Bellatrix fighting 3 witches, only to get singled out by Molly Weasley, and then getting absolutely destroyed. And then, of course, you have Harry himself doing the final fight and facing down Voldemort for the final time, and coming out victorious. And then we show him living a life of peace afterwards, 19 years later. All grown up, the war is over, and everything's well. Until, of course, Cursed Child came along and ruined it. Once again, that book does not exist in my peripheral vision. Harry Potter ended at book 7, and it ended very well. Thank you very much. With all that being said, this will wrap up Reading Reflections, Episode 1 for now. And I hope to hear your all's opinion on what your favorite moments of Harry Potter were. Not to mention, what was your favorite book in the series? I really want to know. With that being said, what would you all like for me to cover next on the next episode of Reading Reflections? Your two options are the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan, which I have read the first series, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, so that will be the subject in that episode. But when I read Heroes of Olympus, you can bet that's getting its own episode. Or I could cover George R. R. Martin's Game of Thrones or the Song of Ice and Fire series. I want to hear it from you all. Which one would you all like me to talk about next on the next episode of Reading Reflections? Feel free to leave a vote down below in the comments section. And if you did like this, please feel free to let me know. Once again, thank you all for listening to this crazy man's ramblings, and I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Reading Reflections. And if you did like this, feel free to let me know that as well. I love hearing your all's feedback. More importantly, thank you for joining me on this journey to start a new series now. And I hope that this will be a long-running series for the channel in the future. Thank you all once again for listening. This is Rambling Collector, signing off. Have a great day, my fellow readers, and keep on reading.